The carriage door slammed shut behind her like a coffin lid. Catherine Whitlock stood in the rain, staring at Blackthorn Estate's iron gates, and realized with cold certainty that she'd been sold. Not married off, not sent to help. Sold. Her fiancé's last words echoed in her skull. "Just watch him die, darling. Don't interfere." The Duke was supposed to be a corpse in waiting. A profitable corpse. But the man who opened that door wasn't dying at all. And Catherine, she was about to become the most dangerous thing a desperate woman could be. Awake. Stay until the end. Hit like. Comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain came down like punishment. Catherine stood outside Blackthorn Estate with a single trunk at her feet and mud creeping up the hem of her traveling dress. The driver hadn't even bothered to help her down, just dumped her luggage, took his coin, and disappeared into the storm as if he couldn't get away fast enough. She didn't blame him. Everyone knew the stories. The Duke of Blackthorn was dying, had been dying for 2 years. Some said it was consumption. Others whispered poison. A few claimed he'd been cursed by a woman he wronged, though no one could name her. What they all agreed on was this. Adrian Vale was a dead man who hadn't had the courtesy to stop breathing yet, and Catherine had been sent to watch it happen. "Don't interfere," Thomas had said 3 days ago in his father's study. Her fiancé, the man she was supposed to marry in 6 months. "Just keep him comfortable. Write to me when it's over. There'll be a substantial inheritance once he's gone, and I've made arrangements to manage it." She'd nodded, smiled, played the part of the obedient bride-to-be. She'd even believed she was doing something good. Stupid. So incredibly stupid. The truth had hit her an hour into the carriage ride when she'd opened the leather case Thomas had given her. "Medical supplies," he'd said, "in case the Duke needs them." Inside, a single vial of amber liquid, a syringe, and a folded note in Thomas's handwriting. "Use only if he shows signs of recovery. Half a dose? No more. It will look natural." Her hands had gone numb. Recovery. If he shows signs of recovery. Not comfort. Not aid. Thomas had sent her here to make sure Adrian Vale didn't survive. And if the Duke somehow started to get better, she was supposed to poison him. Catherine had thrown the vial out the carriage window and watched it shatter against the road. Then she'd sat in silence for the next 4 hours, her mind a blank white roar, until the driver announced they'd arrived. Now she stood in the rain, soaked to the skin, staring at a house that looked like it had given up. Blackthorn Estate sprawled across the hillside like a corpse itself. Gray stone, shuttered windows, overgrown gardens choked with weeds. No lights in the windows, no smoke from the chimneys. It looked abandoned. Maybe it was. Maybe the Duke was already dead and no one had bothered to tell anyone. Catherine picked up her trunk, heavy, awkward, soaked through, and started toward the door. The gate was unlocked. Rusted, but unlocked. She pushed through, her boots squelching in the mud, and climbed the front steps. 12 of them. She counted each one, focusing on the number because if she let herself think about what she was walking into, she'd turn around and run. Except she had nowhere to run to. Thomas owned her. Legally, socially, financially. Her father had signed the contract before he died. Her mother had been dead since Catherine was 6. She had no siblings, no fortune, no options. She was an asset, a tool, and she'd just figured it out far, far too late. Catherine reached the door and raised her hand to knock. It opened before she touched it. A man stood in the doorway. Not a servant, not a butler. A man in shirt sleeves and dark trousers, tall and lean, with black hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of winter fog. He looked about 30. Maybe younger, hard to tell. His face was all sharp angles and shadows, and he held himself with the stillness of someone who'd learned not to waste energy on unnecessary movement. He looked at her, then at her trunk, then back at her. "You're late," he said. His voice was low, clipped, and completely devoid of warmth. Catherine blinked rain out of her eyes. I'm sorry. I don't care." He stepped aside. "Come in before you drown." She hesitated. He raised an eyebrow. "Unless you'd prefer to stand in the rain and explain yourself to the mud." Catherine grabbed her trunk and dragged it inside. The entrance hall was dark, cold, the kind of cold that settles into bones and doesn't leave. A single candle burned on a side table, throwing just enough light to see the dust on the floor and the cobwebs in the corners. The man closed the door behind her with a solid, final thunk. Catherine turned to face him, water dripping from her hair onto the floor. "I'm Catherine Whitlock," she said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "I was sent by—" "Thomas Grayson. I know." The man's expression didn't change. He wrote ahead, "You're here to provide care during my final decline." He said it like he was reading from a script he'd heard too many times. "I assume he gave you the usual instructions. Keep me comfortable. Don't let me suffer, right when I'm dead." Catherine's throat went dry. You're the Duke?" "Adrian Vale, yes." He looked her up and down, clinical and detached. "You were expecting someone older." "I was expecting someone—" She trailed off. "Dying?" Adrian's mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I am. Just slowly." He didn't look like he was dying. He looked exhausted. Thin, yes, too thin, with shadows under his eyes and a pallor that suggested he hadn't seen sunlight in months. But his eyes were clear, sharp, aware. And the way he moved, the controlled precision of it, didn't match the stories she'd heard. "You're staring," Adrian said flatly. Catherine flinched. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "Everyone stares, it's fine." He turned and started walking down the hall. "Your room is upstairs, third door on the left. I don't keep staff anymore, so you'll have to manage your own meals. Kitchen's at the back. Don't touch anything in my study. Don't go into the east wing. Don't bother me unless I'm actively bleeding or unconscious." He said it all without looking back, his voice echoing off the bare walls. Catherine stood frozen, her trunk still in her hands. "Wait." Adrian stopped, didn't turn around. "What about your care?" Catherine asked. "What do you need? Medication? Treatment? I was told—" "You were told I'm dying," Adrian interrupted. "And I am. There's nothing you can do about it. Nothing anyone can do about it." Now he did turn, and his eyes were cold and hard and completely, utterly certain. "Thomas sent you here because he wants a witness, someone to confirm I died naturally of my illness, with no foul play involved. That's all you are. A witness." The words hit like a slap. Catherine's hands tightened on the trunk handle. "That's not—" she started. "It is." Adrian's voice was flat. "And we both know it. So let's not pretend this is anything more than what it is. You stay until I die. You write to Thomas. You leave. Everyone gets what they want." "And what do you want?" The words came out sharper than Catherine intended. Adrian stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was the saddest thing she'd ever seen. "I want you to stop asking questions and go to your room, Miss Whitlock." He turned and disappeared into the darkness. Catherine's room was small, clean, and freezing. A bed, a washstand, a single window that rattled in the wind. No fire in the grate, no candles except the one she'd brought from downstairs. She set her trunk down, peeled off her wet cloak, and sat on the edge of the bed. Her hands were shaking. "You're a witness." She'd known Thomas was using her. She'd figured that out in the carriage. But hearing it confirmed, spoken out loud by the man it was happening to, made it real in a way that turned her stomach. Adrian Vale knew. He knew Thomas wanted him dead. Knew Catherine had been sent to make sure it happened. And he'd let her in anyway. Why? Catherine stood and paced to the window. Outside, the storm was getting worse. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the overgrown gardens and the forest beyond. For a moment, she thought she saw movement near the tree line, something dark and quick. But then the lightning faded and there was nothing. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass. She should leave. First thing in the morning, she should walk back down that road and find another carriage and disappear, change her name, find work somewhere. Anything. Except Thomas would find her. And when he did, he'd make sure she never disappeared again. Catherine's reflection stared back at her from the window, pale and hollow-eyed. "You were sold," it seemed to say, "and you didn't even realize it until it was too late." She turned away. She didn't sleep. Around midnight, she gave up trying and went downstairs to find the kitchen. The house was a maze, dark hallways that twisted and turned, rooms that opened into other rooms, staircases that led nowhere. Catherine used her single candle to navigate, her footsteps echoing too loud in the silence. The kitchen, when she finally found it, was surprisingly intact. Clean counters, organized shelves, a fire burning low in the hearth. Someone had been here recently. Catherine set her candle down and started opening cupboards. Bread, cheese, apples that looked a few days old but still edible. She put together a rough meal and sat at the long wooden table, eating mechanically. Couldn't sleep? She nearly choked. Adrian stood in the doorway, holding a lamp. He'd changed into different clothes, still simple, still dark, and his hair was damp, like he'd washed recently. "I'm sorry," Catherine said automatically. "I didn't mean to intrude. It's a kitchen. You're allowed to eat." He crossed to the hearth and added another log to the fire. "Though if you're planning to poison me, you should know I've built up a tolerance to most common toxins. You'd need something exotic." Catherine's fork clattered against her plate. Adrian glanced at her. "That was a joke?" "It wasn't funny." "No," he agreed. "It wasn't." He poured himself a cup of water from the pitcher on the counter and leaned against the wall, watching her with that same clinical detachment. Catherine set down her fork. "Why did you let me in?" "Excuse me?" "You know why Thomas sent me. You said it yourself, so why let me stay?" Adrian took a sip of water. "Because refusing would have raised questions, and Thomas doesn't like questions." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting." They stared at each other across the kitchen. Catherine broke first. "I'm not going to hurt you." "I know." "How?" "Because you threw away the vial." Catherine's breath stopped. Adrian set down his cup. "The driver told me, said you chucked something out the window an hour into the trip and looked like you wanted to follow it." He tilted his head slightly. "Thomas gave you poison, didn't he?" She couldn't speak. "It's fine," Adrian said almost gently. "I expected it. He's been trying to kill me for 2 years. Sent 3 caregivers before you. The first one tried to smother me with a pillow. The second one laced my tea with arsenic. The third one just set the East Wing on fire and ran." Catherine's stomach lurched. "And you just survived?" "Yes." Adrian's expression was unreadable. "I'm harder to kill than I look." "This is insane. This is reality, Miss Whitlock." He picked up his cup again. "And now you're part of it." "I don't want to be." "Neither do I. But here we are." Catherine stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I won't do it. I won't spy for him. I won't report back. I won't—" "Then what will you do?" Adrian interrupted. His voice was quiet, but it cut through her rising panic like a blade. "Go back to Thomas and tell him you refuse? He'll marry you anyway, and once you're his wife, you'll have even less power than you do now." "I could run." "Where? With what money? What skills?" Adrian stepped closer. Not threatening, just relentless. "You're a gentlewoman with no family, no fortune, and no prospects. Thomas owns you. Legally. Completely. The only reason you're here instead of locked in his house is because he thought you'd be useful." Every word was true. Every word was a nail in a coffin Catherine hadn't realized she was building. She sank back into her chair, her hands fisted in her lap. "I hate you," she whispered. "I don't blame you," Adrian said, and he meant it. Bolting. The next morning, Catherine woke to sunlight. Actual sunlight, pale and cold, but real. She stumbled to the window and stared out at Blackthorn Estate in daylight. It looked worse. The gardens weren't just overgrown, they were destroyed. Broken statues, dead trees, paths choked with thorns. And beyond that, the forest pressed in close, dark and dense and unwelcoming. Catherine dressed quickly, a plain gray dress, practical and worn, and went downstairs. Adrian was in the library. She found him by following the sound of pages turning. The library was the only room in the house that seemed alive. Shelves crammed with books, a fire burning in the hearth, papers scattered across a massive oak desk. Adrian sat behind the desk, reading. He didn't look up when she entered. "There's bread in the kitchen," he said. "Help yourself." Catherine ignored that. "I want to help." Now he looked up. "No, you don't." "Yes, I do." "Why?" "Because I'm stuck here. And if I'm stuck here, I'd rather be useful than complicit." Adrian studied her for a long moment. Then he closed his book. "You don't know what you're asking." "Then tell me." "I'm dying, Miss Whitlock, slowly, painfully. And there's nothing you or anyone else can do to stop it. He said it like he was reciting a fact. Every physician I've seen has confirmed it. Whatever's wrong with me, it's incurable. What are your symptoms? Excuse me? Catherine crossed her arms. Your symptoms. If you're dying, what's killing you? Adrian's jaw tightened. Weakness, fatigue, pain, recurring fever, loss of appetite. The usual. That's not specific. It doesn't need to be. Yes, it does. Catherine stepped closer. Because the usual could be anything from consumption to deliberate poisoning to simple malnutrition. And if no one's bothered to figure out which, then maybe you're not dying at all. Maybe you're just being kept sick. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Adrian stood slowly. Get out. No. I said, I heard you. Catherine planted her feet. And I'm not leaving until you answer one question. When was the last time someone actually examined you instead of just writing you off as hopeless? Adrian's hands clenched into fists. 2 years ago, Dr. Whitmore. He said I had 6 months to live. And here you are, 2 years later. Catherine's voice was steady now, certain. Which means either he was wrong or something changed. So which is it? For the first time since she'd arrived, Adrian Vale looked uncertain. I don't know, he said quietly. Catherine nodded. Then let's find out. They started with his records. Adrian kept meticulous notes, years of them, dating back to the first symptoms. Catherine spread them across the library desk and started reading. Fever, sporadic, no pattern. Weakness, constant, worsening. Pain, localized to his chest and abdomen, sharp and sudden. Weight loss, significant. Treatment, bloodletting, leeches, laudanum, various tonics prescribed by Dr. Whitmore. Catherine read the same notes 3 times, her frown deepening. What? Adrian asked. He sat across from her, watching. You're not getting better, Catherine said slowly. But you're not getting worse either. Not consistently. That's not possible. It's what the records show. She tapped one entry. Here, January of last year, you had a severe episode, fever, pain, couldn't get out of bed. Dr. Whitmore increased your laudanum dose. I remember. And 2 weeks later, you were better. Not cured, but better, stronger. Catherine flipped to another page. Then in March, another episode, same pattern. Severe symptoms, increased medication, temporary improvement. Adrian was frowning now. What are you saying? I'm saying the pattern doesn't match a progressive illness. It matches something cyclical, something triggered. Catherine looked up at him. When do you take the medication Dr. Whitmore prescribed? Every day. Twice a day. And the episodes? When do they happen? Adrian thought about it. When I try to reduce the dose. Or miss it. The air in the room seemed to contract. Catherine's voice was very quiet. Adrian, I think someone's been poisoning you. No. He shook his head. That's not... Whitmore's been my physician for 10 years. He wouldn't... Maybe not deliberately. Catherine was already flipping through the records again. But if someone else had access to your medication... There's no one else. I told you, I don't keep staff. What about Whitmore? Does he prepare the medication himself? He has it delivered, monthly. By whom? Adrian opened his mouth, closed it. I don't know. Catherine stood. Then we need to find out. The medication arrived every month in a wooden crate, delivered by a boy who couldn't have been more than 14. Catherine watched from the library window as he hauled it up the front steps, knocked twice, and disappeared before anyone could answer. Adrian retrieved the crate himself. He carried it to the library without a word, set it on the desk between them, and stepped back. Open it, Catherine said. You open it. She shot him a look but didn't argue. The crate wasn't locked, just nailed shut. Catherine found a letter opener in the desk drawer and pried the lid off. Inside, 12 glass bottles, each filled with dark amber liquid. No labels, no markings, nothing to indicate what they contained or who'd prepared them. Catherine picked one up, held it to the light. The liquid was thick, almost syrupy, with sediment at the bottom. How much do you take? She asked. 2 spoonfuls, morning and night. And you've been doing this for 2 years? Yes. Catherine set the bottle down carefully. We need to test this. Adrian's expression was unreadable. How? I don't know yet. She stared at the bottles, her mind racing. But if someone's been dosing you with something that mimics illness, there has to be a way to prove it. And if you're wrong, then we've wasted time. But if I'm right, she looked up at him. If I'm right, someone's been slowly killing you and making it look natural. And the moment you actually start to recover, they'll know their plan failed. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached past her and picked up one of the bottles. There's a chemist in Ashford, he said slowly. 3 hours' ride. He owes me a favor. Can we trust him? More than I trust anyone else right now. Adrian's mouth twisted. Which isn't saying much. Catherine nodded. Then we go to Ashford. No, I go to Ashford. You stay here. Absolutely not. Catherine. Don't! She cut him off, her voice sharp. I'm not staying here alone while you ride off to confirm whether or not someone's been poisoning you. If something happens to you on that road, no one will know. No one will care. And I'll be stuck in this house waiting for a man who's never coming back. Adrian stared at her. You don't trust me to return. I don't trust the world not to kill you before you get the chance. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. He looked away. Fine, he said quietly. We leave at dawn. Oh, they left in darkness, actually. 4 a.m, when the roads were empty and the sky was still black. Adrian had a horse, a tall bay gelding named Archer, and Catherine rode behind him, holding onto his waist and trying not to think about how close they were, or how warm he was, or how this was probably the most improper thing she'd done in her entire life. The road to Ashford cut through dense forest, narrow and rutted and treacherous in the dark. Adrian rode carefully, guiding Archer around the worst of the mud, but it was slow going. Catherine's arms ached, her back ached, everything ached. You could have brought a carriage, she muttered against his shoulder. Too conspicuous. This is conspicuous. This is fast. There's a difference. Catherine didn't have the energy to argue. The forest started to thin as the sky turned gray. By the time the sun actually rose, they were riding through open farmland, fields of wheat and barley, scattered cottages with smoke rising from their chimneys. Normal. Peaceful. Catherine hadn't realized how much she'd missed normal until she saw it again. How long have you been alone? She asked suddenly. Adrian's shoulders tensed. What? At Blackthorn. How long since you had anyone there besides yourself? Why does it matter? It doesn't. I'm just curious. He didn't answer for a long time. Catherine was about to give up and stop asking when he finally spoke. 1.5 years, Adrian said quietly. The staff left after the 3rd attempt on my life. Can't blame them. No one wants to work in a house where the master might not wake up in the morning. You could have hired new staff. And risk bringing in someone else Thomas paid off? Adrian's laugh was bitter. No, it was safer alone. Safer, not better. No, he agreed. Not better. They rode in silence after that. Ashford was larger than Catherine expected. A proper market town with cobblestone streets and rows of shops and a church that overlooked the main square. Adrian guided Archer through the streets without hesitation, clearly familiar with the layout, and stopped in front of a narrow building wedged between a bakery and a tailor. The sign above the door read, M. Fletcher, chemist and apothecary. Adrian dismounted, then helped Catherine down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground. 3 hours on horseback would do that, but she caught herself on his arm and steadied. You all right? Adrian asked. Fine, just stiff. He studied her for a moment, then nodded and turned toward the shop. Inside, the air smelled like herbs and alcohol and something vaguely metallic. Shelves lined the walls, packed with jars and bottles and strange instruments Catherine didn't recognize. A man stood behind the counter, middle-aged, balding, with spectacles perched on his nose and ink stains on his fingers. He looked up when they entered, and his expression shifted from mild curiosity to shock. Adrian? Martin. Adrian's voice was carefully neutral. Martin Fletcher came around the counter, staring at Adrian like he'd seen a ghost. I thought, everyone said you were dying. I know. Adrian pulled one of the bottles from his coat pocket and set it on the counter. I need you to analyze this. Tell me what's in it. Martin picked up the bottle, his frown deepening. What am I looking for? Poison? Sedatives? Anything that shouldn't be in a standard tonic. The chemist's eyes went wide. Adrian, if someone's been... Just test it. Adrian's voice was flat. Please. Martin nodded slowly. It'll take a few hours, maybe longer, depending on what's in here. We'll wait. There's a tavern across the square. The Rose and Thorn. Tell them I sent you. They'll give you a private room. Adrian hesitated, then nodded. Thank you. Martin was already moving toward his workbench, muttering to himself. Adrian took Catherine's arm and guided her back outside. The Rose and Thorn was warm and loud and smelled like roasted meat and ale. Adrian got them a room on the second floor, small, clean, with 2 chairs and a table by the window, and ordered food sent up. Catherine collapsed into one of the chairs and stared out at the square below. People moved through the streets, ordinary people doing ordinary things. Shopping, talking, laughing. She'd forgotten what that looked like. You're staring again, Adrian said. Catherine glanced at him. He sat in the other chair watching her with that same clinical detachment. I'm thinking, she said. About? How strange this all is. She gestured vaguely at the window. A week ago, I was getting fitted for a wedding dress. Now I'm sitting in a tavern with a man I barely know, waiting to find out if someone's been poisoning him for 2 years. Regretting your choices? Every single one. Adrian's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. You could still leave. And go where? Anywhere. You're not my prisoner, Catherine. No, she agreed. I'm Thomas's. Which is worse. The food arrived. Bread, cheese, roasted chicken, and 2 mugs of cider. Catherine ate mechanically, not tasting anything. Adrian barely touched his plate. You need to eat, Catherine said. I'm not hungry. You're never hungry. That's part of the problem. Adrian gave her a flat look. Don't start. I'm not starting anything. I'm stating a fact. Catherine pushed his plate closer. If someone's been keeping you sick, part of it is probably malnutrition, which means you need to eat whether you want to or not. You're not my nurse. No, I'm the idiot who decided to help you, which means I get to nag. She picked up a piece of bread and held it out. Eat. Adrian stared at the bread like it had personally offended him. Then, to her surprise, he took it. He ate slowly, methodically, his expression never changing. But he ate. Catherine watched him and felt something strange twist in her chest. Not pity, not sympathy, something closer to anger. This man, this sharp, controlled, infuriating man, had been abandoned, left alone in a crumbling house with no one to care whether he lived or died. And he'd accepted it, just accepted it, like he didn't deserve anything better. Why didn't you fight? Catherine asked quietly. Adrian looked up. What? When people started leaving, when the attempts on your life started, why didn't you fight back? His jaw tightened. I did. No. You survived. That's not the same thing. It's all I could do. No, it's not. Catherine leaned forward. You're a duke, Adrian. You have power, resources. You could have gone to the authorities, hired investigators, forced people to answer for what they did. But you didn't. You just retreated. Why? Adrian set down his bread. His hands were shaking. Because I'm tired, he said quietly. I've been fighting for 2 years, Catherine. Fighting to stay alive, fighting to figure out what's wrong with me, fighting to keep my estate from falling apart. And I'm tired. So if you're asking why I didn't wage some grand campaign to expose my enemies and reclaim my honor, it's because I don't have the energy. I'm just trying to make it through each day without dying. The rawness in his voice made Catherine's throat tighten. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be. Adrian looked away. You're right. I should have fought harder, should have demanded answers, should have... He stopped. It doesn't matter now. It does matter, because you're still alive, and that means there's still time to fight back. Adrian laughed, sharp and bitter. With what army? With me. He stared at her. Catherine held his gaze. I know I'm not much. I know I have no power, no connections, no real skills. But I'm here, and I'm not leaving. So if you want to fight, I'll fight with you. Adrian's expression was unreadable. Then he nodded. Once, barely, but it was enough. Martin sent word 3 hours later. They returned to the shop as the sun started to set, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. Martin met them at the door, his face grim. Inside, he said quietly. Now. They followed him to the back room, where his workbench was covered in glass vials and strange apparatus. The bottle Adrian had brought sat in the center, open and half empty. Martin picked up a sheet of paper covered in notes. I tested for everything I could think of. Arsenic, mercury, belladonna, hemlock, aconite. Nothing. Catherine's heart sank. So it's safe. I didn't say that. Martin set down the paper. I said there's no poison, but there's something else. Something I've never seen before. Adrian stepped closer. What? A compound. Synthetic, I think. It acts like a sedative, depresses the nervous system, slows metabolism, induces fatigue. But it's subtle, not enough to kill, just enough to keep someone weak. Catherine's hands clenched into fists. How long would it take to build up in someone's system? Months, maybe a year, depends on the dose. And if someone stopped taking it, Martin hesitated. Withdrawal. Severe, probably. Fever, pain, confusion. It would mimic the very illness it's supposed to treat. Adrian had gone very still. So every time I tried to reduce the dose, you weren't getting worse, Martin finished. You were going through withdrawal. The silence that followed was suffocating. Catherine broke it. Can you identify who made this? No, but I can tell you it's expensive, complex. Whoever synthesized this knew exactly what they were doing. Dr. Whitmore, Adrian said quietly. Martin's expression darkened. Richard Whitmore? You know him? I know of him. He's been buying chemicals from me for years. Always pays in cash, never says what for. Martin looked at the bottle. If he's behind this, Adrian, you need to be careful. Whitmore has connections, powerful ones. I don't care. You should. Martin grabbed Adrian's arm. Listen to me. If you accuse him publicly, he'll destroy you. He has half the aristocracy in his pocket. You'll be labeled a madman, discredited, locked away, and no one will question it because you're already considered a dying recluse. Then what do you suggest I do? Adrian's voice was cold. Keep taking the poison? Wait until it finally kills me? No. I suggest you disappear. Take this evidence, leave Blackthorn, start over somewhere no one knows you. I can't do that. Why not? Because Blackthorn is mine. Adrian pulled his arm free. My family built that estate. My father died defending it. I'm not abandoning it because some corrupt physician decided I was expendable. Martin looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Adrian's expression stopped him. Then at least be smart about it, Martin said finally. Don't confront Whitmore directly. Gather more evidence. Find out who else is involved. Build a case strong enough that even his connections can't save him. Adrian nodded slowly. How long do I have? Before what? Before the withdrawal kills me. Martin's face went pale. You're stopping the medication? I have to. If I keep taking it, I'll never get stronger, and I need to be strong for what's coming. Adrian, how long, Martin? The chemist looked at Catherine as if hoping she'd talk sense into him, but Catherine just met his eyes and waited. Martin sighed. A week, maybe 2. After that, your body should start clearing the compound, but the withdrawal, he shook his head. It's going to be hell. I've survived worse. Have you? Martin's voice was quiet. Because from where I'm standing, you look like a man who's been surviving on sheer stubbornness, and stubbornness only gets you so far. Adrian didn't answer. Catherine did. He won't be alone this time, she said. Both men looked at her. Catherine met Adrian's eyes. You're not doing this alone. I'll be there, whatever happens. Adrian's expression softened just for a moment, then the mask slid back into place. We should go, he said. It's a long ride back. They left Ashford as the last light faded from the sky. The ride back was slower, darker, more difficult. Adrian's hands were tight on the reins, his body rigid. Catherine could feel the tension radiating off him. Talk to me, she said after an hour of silence. About what? Anything, I don't care. Just talk. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then, I used to ride this road with my father. When I was younger, he'd take me to Ashford every month to visit Martin's father, the old chemist. We'd spend the day there, then ride back at sunset. What was he like? Your father? Strong, stubborn, Relentless. Adrian's voice was soft. He died 5 years ago. Heart failure. I inherited Blackthorn and everything that came with it. Including Dr. Whitmore? Including Whitmore. Adrian's jaw tightened. My father trusted him. Never questioned his treatments, his advice, his bills. And when I got sick, Whitmore was the first person I turned to. You couldn't have known. I should have. The bitterness in his voice was sharp enough to cut. I should have questioned everything, should have demanded second opinions, should have... Stop! Catherine tightened her grip on his waist. You were sick, Adrian, alone and sick and being systematically poisoned. You're not responsible for trusting the wrong person. Then who is? The person who betrayed that trust. Adrian didn't respond. They rode in silence the rest of the way. They reached Blackthorn just before midnight. Adrian dismounted first, swaying slightly, and Catherine caught his arm. You all right? Fine. He wasn't. Even in the darkness, Catherine could see the exhaustion in his face, the tremor in his hands. Come on, she said quietly. Let's get you inside. She helped him up the steps and through the front door. The house was cold and dark and silent, exactly as they'd left it. Adrian pulled away from her in the entrance hall. I need to... He didn't finish, just turned and walked toward his study, his footsteps unsteady. Catherine followed. The study was a disaster. Papers everywhere, books stacked haphazardly, a desk covered in maps and ledgers and correspondence. Adrian went straight to the desk, pulled out a drawer, and removed a leather-bound journal. What is that? Catherine asked. My father's records, estate finances, contracts, physician bills. He flipped through the pages, his movements jerky. If Whitmore's been doing this for 2 years, there'll be evidence, payments, receipts, something. Adrian, you need to rest. I need to find proof. You need to rest. Catherine crossed the room and took the journal from his hands. You've been awake for 20 hours. You rode 3 hours each way. You just found out you've been poisoned. Your body is about to go through hell. And you want to do accounting? Adrian's hands clenched into fists. Give that back. No. Catherine. No. She set the journal on the desk, out of his reach. You're going to bed, now. And tomorrow, when you're not half dead from exhaustion, we'll go through these records together. But right now, you need sleep. He stared at her, and for a moment Catherine thought he might actually fight her. Then his shoulders sagged. Fine, he said quietly. Catherine nodded. Good. Come on. She led him upstairs to his room, a sparse, cold space with a bed and little else. Adrian sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. I'm scared, he said suddenly. Catherine froze. What? The withdrawal. He looked up at her and his eyes were raw. I'm scared, Catherine, and I don't know what to do with that. Catherine's throat tightened. She crossed the room and sat beside him. You don't have to do anything with it. Just feel it and know that I'll be here when it gets bad. Why? Because no one should have to go through this alone. Adrian's hands were shaking again. Catherine took them in hers, held them steady. We'll figure this out, she said quietly. Together. He nodded, but he didn't let go of her hands. And Catherine didn't pull away. Dead. The first dose Adrian didn't take was the one scheduled for the next morning. Catherine woke before dawn and went to his room. He was already awake, sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at the bottle of amber liquid on his nightstand. You don't have to do this today, Catherine said from the doorway. Yes, I do. Adrian's voice was steady. If I wait, I'll talk myself out of it. He picked up the bottle, carried it to the window, and poured the contents onto the ground outside. Then he threw the bottle after it. Catherine heard it shatter against the stone below. Well, she said quietly, no going back now. Adrian turned to face her. His expression was calm, controlled, but his hands were shaking. How long until it starts? He asked. Martin said a few hours, maybe less. Adrian nodded. Then we work while we can. They went to the study. Catherine had already started going through his father's records the night before. She hadn't been able to sleep, and she'd found something. Look at this, she said, spreading the ledger across the desk. Monthly payments to Whitmore. Same amount every month for the past 2 years. But before that, before you got sick, the payments were irregular, smaller, Normal physician fees. Adrian leaned over her shoulder, scanning the numbers. What changed? You got sick, Catherine pointed to a date. This is when your symptoms started. And this, she moved her finger down the page. This is when the payments became regular. So he started poisoning me, then charged me for the privilege. Not just that. Catherine flipped to another page. Look at the amounts. They've been increasing, every 6 months, a little more. Why would medication costs go up if your condition was stable? Adrian's expression darkened. They wouldn't, unless someone was deliberately escalating the dose. They stared at each other. We need more, Adrian said finally. This isn't enough to prove anything. It's just suspicious payments. Then we find more. They worked through the morning, pulling records, cross-referencing dates, building a timeline. Catherine's eyes burned from reading, her back ached from hunching over the desk, but she didn't stop. Around noon, Adrian went still. Catherine looked up. What is it? I feel... He pressed a hand to his chest. Strange. Define strange. Hot. Cold. I don't... His face had gone pale. It's starting. Catherine stood quickly. All right, upstairs. Now. Adrian didn't argue. She helped him to his room and got him into bed. His skin was already burning, sweat beading on his forehead. This is bad, he muttered. It's going to get worse. Catherine pulled a chair close to the bed. But you're going to survive it. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Adrian's eyes locked on hers. Promise me something. What? If I don't make it, if this kills me, promise you'll finish what we started. Expose Whitmore. Make sure he pays. Catherine's jaw tightened. You're not going to die. Catherine, you're not. She grabbed his hand, held it tight. You're going to get through this, and then we're going to destroy the bastard who did this to you. Together. Do you understand me? Adrian stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. Faint, but real. You're terrifying when you're determined. Good. Remember that. His smile faded as another wave of pain hit. Catherine felt his hand tighten around hers, his body going rigid. It was going to be a long night. It was going to be a long week. But Catherine didn't let go. The first day was fever. Adrian's temperature spiked so high, Catherine thought his skin might actually burn her when she touched him. She spent hours changing cold compresses, forcing water down his throat, holding him still when the tremors got so bad he nearly fell out of bed. He didn't recognize her half the time. Called her by names she didn't know, shouted at people who weren't there. Once, he grabbed her wrist so hard she thought the bone might crack and begged her not to let them take him. No one's taking you anywhere, Catherine said, prying his fingers loose. You're safe. I'm here. He didn't hear her. By nightfall, she was exhausted. Her dress was soaked with sweat, his and hers both. Her hands ached from wringing out cloths. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep, but she didn't leave. The second day was worse. The fever broke just before dawn, but the pain started immediately after. Adrian curled into himself, gasping. His hands clawed against his chest like he could physically tear out whatever was hurting him. Where? Catherine demanded. Where does it hurt? Everywhere. His voice was raw. Everywhere, Catherine. I can't. She ran downstairs, found the laudanum Dr. Whitmore had prescribed months ago, stared at the bottle for a long, hard minute. Then she threw it against the wall and watched it shatter. No more poison, not even to ease the pain. When she returned to Adrian's room, he was biting down on his own hand to keep from screaming. Catherine grabbed a leather belt from his wardrobe, folded it, and pressed it between his teeth. Bite this instead. He did, hard enough that she heard his teeth crack against the leather. She sat beside him and held his hand and counted the seconds until the worst of it passed. It took 3 hours. The third day he stopped eating. Catherine tried everything. Broth, bread soaked in water, plain boiled potatoes. He turned away from all of it, too weak to even argue. You have to eat, Catherine said, her voice sharp with frustration. If you don't, you'll die. And I didn't sit through 2 days of hell just to watch you starve. Can't, Adrian whispered. I'll be sick. Then be sick, but eat first. She practically forced the broth down his throat, 1 spoonful at a time. He threw up half of it 10 minutes later, but the other half stayed down. Catherine counted that as a victory. The 4th day, Thomas sent a letter. It arrived by courier just after noon. Catherine was downstairs trying to find something, anything, in the kitchen that Adrian might be able to keep down when she heard the knock. She opened the door to find a young man in expensive livery holding an envelope. "Miss Whitlock?" he asked. Catherine's stomach dropped. "Yes." "From Mr. Thomas Grayson." He handed her the envelope and left before she could respond. Catherine stared at the letter like it might bite her. She knew what it would say before she even opened it. Thomas wanted an update. Wanted confirmation that Adrian was dying. Wanted her to report back like the obedient little spy he'd tried to turn her into. Catherine carried the letter to the library, sat at Adrian's desk, and read it. "My dearest Catherine, I trust you are settling in at Blackthorn. I have not heard from you in over a week, which concerns me. Please send word immediately regarding the Duke's condition. If his health has deteriorated significantly, I will make arrangements to visit and assist with final matters. I expect your reply within 3 days. Yours, Thomas." Catherine read it twice. Then she crumpled it into a ball and threw it into the fireplace. She'd deal with Thomas later. Right now, Adrian needed her more. The 5th day, something changed. Catherine woke. She'd fallen asleep in the chair beside Adrian's bed again, to find him sitting up. Actually, sitting up. Not collapsed against the headboard, not half-conscious and delirious. Sitting. "Adrian?" He turned to look at her. His eyes were clear, focused. "How long?" he asked. His voice was hoarse, wrecked, but coherent. Catherine sat up too fast and nearly fell out of the chair. "5 days? It's been 5 days." "Feels longer." It was longer. Catherine stood, crossed to the bed. "How do you feel?" Adrian considered that. "Like I was trampled by a horse, then set on fire, then trampled again." "Better than yesterday, then." "Was I that bad?" Catherine gave him a flat look. "You tried to fight me at one point, called me a demon and accused me of stealing your soul." Adrian's face went red. "I didn't." "You absolutely did. I'm sorry." "Don't be. You were out of your mind." Catherine sat on the edge of the bed and pressed her hand to his forehead. Still warm, but not burning. "The worst is over. Your body's clearing the poison. You sound certain." "I am certain. I've been watching you for 5 days straight. I know what I'm talking about." Adrian studied her face, really looked at her, for the first time in days. "You look terrible," he said. "So do you." "I have an excuse." "So do I." "I've been keeping you alive." Catherine pulled her hand back. "You need to eat, real food this time. Think you can manage that?" "I can try." She helped him downstairs, slowly, carefully, his arm over her shoulders because his legs weren't quite steady yet. They made it to the kitchen without incident, and Catherine settled him into a chair while she heated soup. Actual soup this time, not just broth, with vegetables and chunks of chicken and bread on the side. Adrian ate half a bowl before he had to stop, but it stayed down. Catherine watched him and felt something loosen in her chest. Relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. "We did it," she said quietly. Adrian looked up. "What?" "We did it. You're going to live." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he set down his spoon, dropped his head into his hands, and started shaking. Catherine realized, with a jolt, that he was crying. She stood quickly, moved to his side, put a hand on his shoulder. "Adrian, I didn't think I would," he said, his voice muffled. These past 2 years, I thought I was dying. Everyone told me I was dying. And I believed them. I accepted it, prepared for it." Catherine's throat tightened. "And now?" Adrian looked up at her, his face wet. "Now you're telling me I'm going to live, and I don't know what to do with that." Catherine knelt beside his chair. "You survive. You keep going, and you make the people who did this to you pay for every single day they stole from you." Adrian's laugh was broken. "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple. It's necessary." Catherine held his gaze. "You deserve justice, Adrian, and I'm going to help you get it." He reached out, hesitated, then touched her face. Just her cheek, light and careful, like he was afraid she might disappear. "Why are you doing this?" he asked quietly. "Because someone should." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." They stayed like that for a moment. Her kneeling, him sitting, the space between them charged with something neither of them could name. Then Adrian pulled his hand back. "We should keep working," he said, "while I can still think straight." Catherine nodded and stood. "The study?" "The study." They spent the rest of the day going through records. Adrian was weak, his hands still shaking, but his mind was sharp. Sharper than it had been in weeks, maybe months. Together, they built a case. Dr. Whitmore had been paid nearly £10,000 over 2 years, far more than any physician should charge for routine care. And the payments always came from Adrian's estate account, which meant Whitmore had access to his finances. "He's been robbing you blind," Catherine said, staring at the ledger. "The medication, the treatments, the consultations, all of it inflated. And because you were too sick to question it, he just kept taking." "There's more." Adrian pulled out another document. "This is the deed to the east wing of Blackthorn, the section that burned." "What about it?" "It was insured for £50,000. Adrian's expression was grim. "The fire happened 6 months ago. The insurance claim was filed immediately, but the payout never came." Catherine frowned. "Why not?" "Because Whitmore told the insurance company I was mentally unstable, that I'd set the fire myself during a fever-induced episode." Adrian's jaw tightened. "They refused to pay until I could be evaluated by an independent physician, but every time they tried to send someone, Whitmore blocked it, said I was too ill to receive visitors. So the money's just sitting there, waiting for me to die. Once I'm gone, the claim would go to my heir." "Who is?" Adrian's smile was cold. "Thomas Grayson, my cousin, and your fiancé." Catherine felt the floor tilt. "What?" "Thomas is my heir, has been since my father died." Adrian's voice was flat. "If I die without children, everything goes to him, the estate, the title, the insurance payout, everything." "He never told me. Why would he? You were just a pawn." Adrian stood, started pacing. "Whitmore keeps me sick. Thomas positions himself as the grieving heir, and when I finally die, they split the inheritance. 50,000 from the insurance, plus the estate's value, minus debts, probably close to 70,000 total." Catherine's hands were shaking now. "We need to prove this." "How? We have suspicious payments and a convenient fire. That's not proof of conspiracy." "Then we make them confess." Adrian stopped pacing. "What?" "We make them think their plan worked." Catherine's mind was racing now. "Whitmore expects you to die. Thomas expects a letter confirming it, so we give them what they want. You want me to fake my death. I want you to stage it." Catherine crossed to the desk, grabbed paper and ink. "We send word to Thomas that you've taken a turn for the worse. Critical condition, not expected to survive the week. He'll come, and when he does, we'll be ready." "Ready to do what exactly?" "Get a confession." Catherine started writing. "If we can get Thomas to admit what he's planning, what he and Whitmore have already done, we'll have proof." Adrian watched her write, his expression unreadable. "This is insane. This is survival. If it goes wrong, then we're no worse off than we are now." Catherine finished the letter and held it up. "But if it works, we end this, permanently." Adrian read the letter, then he read it again. "You're asking me to bet everything on Thomas being stupid enough to confess to murder. I'm asking you to bet everything on Thomas being arrogant enough to gloat." Catherine set the letter down. "He thinks he's won, Adrian. He thinks you're dying and I'm his obedient little spy and no one will ever question what happened. People like that always talk too much." Adrian was quiet for a long, tense moment. Then he picked up a pen and signed the letter. "Send it," he said. Catherine sealed the envelope and sent it with the same courier who'd delivered Thomas's letter. Then they waited. The response came 2 days later. Thomas would arrive at Blackthorn in 3 days' time. He was bringing Dr. Whitmore with him. "To ensure your beloved Duke receives the best care in his final hours." Catherine read the letter aloud to Adrian, who was sitting in the library looking stronger every day. Color had returned to his face. His hands were steady. He'd even started eating full meals. 3 days, Catherine said. "We have 3 days to prepare." "Prepare what exactly? A deathbed scene?" Adrian's tone was dry. "I'm not a very good actor." "You don't have to be. You just have to look sick." Catherine started pacing. "We'll keep you upstairs. Dim lighting, Disheveled appearance, labored breathing. I'll play the distraught caretaker. And when Thomas gets comfortable, when he thinks you're too far gone to understand what's happening, we listen. And if he doesn't confess, then we push him. Catherine stopped pacing. I'll tell him I know. About the poison, the insurance, all of it. He'll either deny it, which proves nothing, or he'll try to justify it. And the moment he does, we have him. Adrian leaned back in his chair. You're terrifying, you know that? You've mentioned it. I'm serious, Catherine. The way you think, it's ruthless. I learned from the best. Her voice was bitter. Thomas taught me how to lie, how to manipulate, how to smile while planning someone's destruction. I'm just using his lessons against him. Adrian's expression softened. This isn't who you are. No, it's who I have to be. Catherine met his eyes. I was sold, Adrian. Traded like property to watch a man die so my fiancé could profit, and I'm done being used. So if that makes me ruthless, fine, I'll be ruthless. They stared at each other. All right, Adrian said finally. We do it your way. The next 3 days were preparation. Catherine moved Adrian back to his bedroom and made it look like a sick room. Curtains drawn. Medicine bottles scattered on the nightstand. Empty, but convincing. Rumpled sheets. A chair beside the bed where she'd theoretically been keeping vigil. She also moved the good bottles, the ones with the poison, back into view. If Whitmore checked, everything would look normal. Adrian practiced looking ill. It wasn't hard. He was still recovering, still weak enough that a few strategic coughs and some pale makeup did the rest. Catherine practiced her role too. The devoted caretaker, the grieving companion, the woman who'd watched a good man die and could do nothing to stop it. She hated every second of it. The morning Thomas was set to arrive, Catherine woke before dawn and checked on Adrian. He was awake, staring at the ceiling. Can't sleep? She asked. Thinking. About? What happens if this doesn't work? Adrian turned his head to look at her. If Thomas doesn't confess, if Whitmore sees through the act, if they just kill us both and stage it as a murder-suicide. Catherine sat on the edge of the bed. Then we die fighting. That's not comforting. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be true. She reached out, took his hand, but I don't think it'll come to that. Thomas is predictable. Whitmore is arrogant, and we're smarter than both of them. Adrian's fingers tightened around hers. I hope you're right. I am. She wasn't sure she believed it, but she said it anyway. They heard the carriage around noon. Catherine was downstairs when it arrived. She'd positioned herself in the entrance hall, looking appropriately distraught. Her dress was rumpled. Her hair was falling out of its pins. She'd even managed to make her eyes red by rubbing them. The door opened. Thomas stepped inside first. He looked exactly as Catherine remembered, handsome in a cold, calculating way, with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. He wore an expensive coat and carried himself like a man who owned the world. Behind him came Dr. Whitmore, older, graying, dignified in a way that made Catherine's skin crawl. He carried a medical bag and wore an expression of professional concern. Catherine. Thomas crossed to her immediately, took her hands. My dear, how are you holding up? She let her voice shake. Not well. Thomas, he's so much worse. I don't think he has much time left. Where is he? Upstairs. Resting. He can barely speak anymore. Thomas's expression was perfectly sympathetic. I'm so sorry you've had to endure this alone. But I'm here now. We'll make sure he's comfortable. Catherine nodded, playing her part. Thank you. I didn't know what else to do. Whitmore stepped forward. Miss Whitlock, I'm Dr. Whitmore. I've been treating the Duke for several years. May I see him? Of course. Please. Catherine led them upstairs, her heart pounding. This was it. Adrian's room was dark when they entered. He lay in bed, eyes half closed, breathing shallow. The performance was flawless. Whitmore moved to the bedside immediately, setting down his bag. Your Grace, can you hear me? Adrian's eyes fluttered open. Doctor, his voice was barely a whisper. How are you feeling? Tired. So tired. Whitmore pulled out a stethoscope, began his examination. Catherine watched him work, watched his expression shift from concern to something else. Satisfaction. He thought Adrian was dying, really dying, and he was pleased. Catherine's hands clenched into fists behind her back. His pulse is weak, Whitmore said, addressing Thomas. Breathing labored. I'm afraid the end is near, perhaps a matter of days. Can anything be done? Thomas asked. I can keep him comfortable, but beyond that, Whitmore shook his head. I'm sorry. Thomas put a hand on Catherine's shoulder. You've done everything you could, my dear. No one could ask for more. Catherine forced tears into her eyes. I just wish I could have helped him. You have helped him. You've been here. That's what matters. Whitmore was preparing a syringe. Catherine's breath caught. What is that? Morphine. For the pain. Whitmore's tone was reassuring. It will help him rest. Is that necessary? Catherine stepped forward. He's already so weak. Miss Whitlock. Whitmore's voice was firm. I've been treating the Duke for years. I know what's best for him. He moved toward Adrian with the syringe. Catherine's mind raced. If Adrian took that injection, if it was more poison, she had to stop this. Now. Don't. Everyone froze. Thomas turned to her. Catherine? Don't give him that. Her voice was steady now, clear. He doesn't need it. Whitmore frowned. Miss Whitlock, I appreciate your concern, but he doesn't need it because he's not dying. Catherine stepped between Whitmore and the bed. He's recovering, has been for a week. Ever since he stopped taking the poison you've been feeding him. The room went silent. Thomas's expression didn't change. Catherine, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the compound Dr. Whitmore's been giving Adrian for 2 years. The one designed to keep him weak, dependent, slowly dying. Catherine's voice was getting louder. I'm talking about the insurance fraud, the inflated payments, the plan to kill Adrian and split his inheritance. Whitmore's face went white. That's absurd. Is it? Catherine pulled a folded paper from her pocket. The analysis from Martin. This is a chemical breakdown of your medication. It's not medicine, it's poison, and you've been dosing him with it for 2 years. Thomas's mask finally cracked. His expression went cold. Put that away. Why? So you can keep lying, keep pretending you're here out of concern instead of greed? Catherine. Thomas's voice was dangerous now. You're overwrought, exhausted. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. Catherine's hands were shaking, but she didn't back down. You sent me here to watch Adrian die, to make sure he didn't recover. And when I refused to play along, you came yourself to finish the job. Thomas took a step toward her. That's enough. No. Adrian's voice cut through the tension. Everyone turned. Adrian sat up. Actually sat up, pushing himself upright with steady hands. His eyes were clear, focused, and full of cold fury. It's not enough, Adrian said. Not until you answer for what you've done. Whitmore stumbled back. Your Grace, this is a misunderstanding. Is it? Adrian swung his legs out of bed, stood, swayed slightly but stayed upright. Because it seems pretty clear to me. You poisoned me, robbed me, conspired with my heir to steal my estate. That's not a misunderstanding. That's attempted murder. Thomas's hand went to his coat. Catherine saw the movement, realized what he was reaching for. Don't! She said sharply. Thomas pulled out a pistol. Catherine's blood went cold. I really hoped it wouldn't come to this, Thomas said quietly. He aimed the gun at Adrian. But you've left me no choice. Adrian didn't move. You're going to shoot me? In front of witnesses? Whitmore will confirm that the Duke in his delirium attacked me. I defended myself. Tragic, but necessary. Thomas's smile was terrible. And Catherine, well, Catherine will be so distraught over her fiancé's death that she'll take her own life. A lover's tragedy. Catherine's stomach turned. You're insane. I'm practical. Thomas cocked the pistol. Now, both of you, against the wall. Neither of them moved. Thomas aimed the gun at Catherine instead. I said move. Adrian stepped forward immediately. Don't! The gunshot was deafening. But Catherine didn't fall. Neither did Adrian. The bullet had gone wide, deliberately wide, slamming into the wall above the headboard. Plaster exploded. Dust rained down. Thomas lowered the gun slightly, his expression cold. That was a warning. The next one won't be. Catherine's ears were ringing. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. but she kept her voice steady. You won't shoot us, won't I? No, because you need this to look natural. Catherine forced herself to meet his eyes. A gunshot raises questions, an investigation, witnesses who might not believe your story. You're too smart for that, Thomas. You've spent 2 years planning this. You won't risk it all on a moment of anger. Thomas stared at her. Then he smiled. You've gotten clever, haven't you? I didn't expect that. You didn't expect a lot of things. True. He gestured with the pistol. But you're wrong about one thing. I don't need this to look natural anymore. You've already destroyed that option by confronting Whitmore in front of witnesses. Whitmore, who'd been pressed against the far wall, spoke up. Thomas, we should... Shut up. Thomas didn't even look at him. You've done your part. Badly, apparently. But it's done. What are you going to do? Adrian asked. His voice was calm, but Catherine could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his weight was balanced like he was preparing to move. Something I should have done 2 years ago. Thomas raised the gun again. I'm going to end this. The door slammed open. Everyone spun toward the sound. Martin Fletcher stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 men in constable uniforms. Behind them, Catherine could see more people, servants, townspeople, faces she didn't recognize. Martin's expression was grim. Put the gun down, Grayson. Thomas's face went white. What is this? This is the law. One of the constables stepped forward, hand on his truncheon. Mr. Fletcher came to us 3 days ago with evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. We've been waiting outside since this morning. You've been... Thomas turned to Catherine, realization dawning. You planned this. Catherine's hands were shaking, but she smiled. I learned from the best. The constable moved closer. Put down the weapon, now. For a moment, Catherine thought Thomas might actually fire. His finger twitched on the trigger, his eyes darting between Adrian and the door. Then his shoulders sagged. He lowered the gun. The constable took it from him immediately, passing it to his partner. Thomas Grayson, Dr. Richard Whitmore, you're both under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. Whitmore made a strangled sound. This is absurd. I'm a respected physician. You're a criminal. Martin stepped into the room, holding a folder thick with papers. I have chemical analyses, financial records, testimony from the courier who delivered your poison. It's over, Whitmore. The second constable pulled out iron shackles. Hands! Whitmore's face crumpled. He looked at Thomas, desperate. Tell them this is a mistake. Thomas said nothing. The constables cuffed them both. Catherine watched, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. It was real. This was actually happening. Adrian moved to her side, his hand finding hers. His palm was warm, solid, real. You did it, he said quietly. We did it. The constables led Thomas and Whitmore toward the door. Thomas turned back once, his eyes locked on Catherine. You'll regret this, he said. I'll make sure of it. No. Catherine's voice was steady now. You won't, because you'll be in prison, and I'll be free. Thomas's expression twisted into something ugly. Then the constables pulled him through the door, and he was gone. The silence that followed was strange, heavy. Martin crossed to Adrian, his expression concerned. Are you all right? I'm alive. Adrian's voice was rough. That's more than I expected to be. I got your letter, the one Catherine sent with the courier. Martin glanced at Catherine. She told me everything, asked me to gather evidence and bring the authorities if Thomas showed up. And you believed her? I believed the chemical analysis. The rest... Martin shrugged. The rest was easy to confirm once I knew where to look. Whitmore's been buying suspicious compounds for years. The payments from your estate were public record. And the insurance claim... He shook his head. Thomas filed it under his own name. He didn't even try to hide it. Adrian let out a long breath. Arrogance. Always is. Martin looked around the room. The constables will need statements from both of you, and there will be a trial. This isn't over yet. I know. Adrian straightened, and Catherine saw something shift in his expression. Purpose, maybe, or determination. But it started, and that's enough. The next few hours were chaos. The constables took statements from Catherine and Adrian, documenting everything from the moment Catherine arrived at Blackthorn to the confrontation that morning. They confiscated Whitmore's medical bag, the poison bottles, the syringe he'd been about to use. Martin provided the chemical analyses and financial records. Another man, a lawyer from Ashford, arrived with copies of the insurance claim and deed transfers Thomas had attempted. By evening, they had enough evidence to hang both men twice over. Catherine sat in the library afterward, exhausted. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Her mind kept replaying the moment Thomas had aimed that gun at her, the sound of the shot, the certainty that she was about to die. Adrian appeared in the doorway carrying 2 glasses and a bottle of amber liquid. "Whiskey," he said. "You look like you need it." Catherine took the glass gratefully. "I've never had whiskey. First time for everything." Adrian sat across from her and poured himself a measure. "To survival." Catherine raised her glass. "To survival." The whiskey burned going down. She coughed, eyes watering. Adrian's mouth twitched. "Not a fan?" "It's terrible. It grows on you." They sat in silence for a while. The fire crackled in the hearth. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the grounds. "What happens now?" Catherine asked finally. "Trial? Conviction? Sentencing?" Adrian swirled his whiskey. "Thomas and Whitmore will both go to prison. Probably for life." "And us?" "That depends." Adrian looked at her. "What do you want to happen?" Catherine had been thinking about that all afternoon. "I don't know. A week ago, I thought I knew exactly what my life would be. Marriage to Thomas, a house in London, children, eventually, the usual. And now? Now I can't imagine any of that." She set down her glass. "I don't want to go back to being who I was. That woman, she was blind, obedient, used. She also saved my life. No, this version did. The one who got angry and refused to accept what she was told." Catherine met his eyes. "I want to stay her." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "The engagement is broken, obviously. Thomas won't be in a position to hold you to any contracts. You'll be free." "Free to do what?" "Whatever you want." He leaned forward. "Catherine, you're brilliant, strategic, ruthless when you need to be. You could do anything." "I could stay here." The words hung between them. Adrian's expression was carefully neutral. "As what?" "I don't know. Estate manager? Housekeeper? Someone who makes sure you actually eat and don't work yourself to death?" Catherine's voice was light, but her heart was pounding. "You need someone, Adrian, and I need somewhere that isn't tied to who I used to be. You're offering to work for me. I'm offering to help you rebuild. This place," she gestured around the library, "it's falling apart. The staff is gone. The grounds are destroyed. You can't do this alone. I've been doing it alone for 2 years. And look where that got you." Catherine's voice was gentle. "You were dying, Adrian. Not from poison, from isolation, from giving up." Adrian flinched. "That's not fair." "It's true, and you know it." Catherine stood, moved to the window. "I'm not saying you need me specifically. I'm saying you need someone. And I happen to be available, unemployed, and already familiar with your incredibly charming personality." That got a laugh out of him. Short and surprised, but real. "You think I'm charming?" "I think you're infuriating, but I'm getting used to it." Adrian stood too, crossed to stand beside her. "If you stay, people will talk." "Let them. They'll assume we're—" He trailed off. "I know what they'll assume. I don't care." Catherine turned to face him. "I spent my whole life caring what people thought. Following rules, being proper. And it got me sold to a man who wanted to watch you die so he could steal your money. I'm done with proper." Adrian studied her face. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He nodded slowly. "All right, stay. As your employee. As my—" Adrian hesitated. "As whatever you want to be." Catherine smiled. "I'll start with estate manager and see where it goes." The trial began 3 weeks later. Catherine and Adrian traveled to London for it, taking a carriage this time instead of riding. Adrian was stronger now, eating regularly, sleeping through the night, color back in his face. He still tired easily, but the improvement was remarkable. The courtroom was packed. News of the case had spread. A duke nearly murdered by his own physician and heir, saved by a woman who'd been sent to spy on him. The scandal was irresistible. Catherine sat in the gallery and watched Thomas stand before the judge. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something harder to define. Fear, maybe. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. The chemical evidence, the financial records, the insurance fraud, testimony from Martin, from the courier, from servants who'd been dismissed from Blackthorn. Catherine was called to testify on the third day. She wore a simple gray dress and kept her voice steady as she recounted everything. Her arrival at Blackthorn, the discovery of the poison, Adrian's withdrawal, the confrontation. The prosecutor asked, "And when Mr. Grayson aimed his weapon at you, what did you think?" "I thought I was going to die." "Were you afraid?" "Terrified." "But you didn't back down." Catherine looked at Thomas. He stared back, his expression unreadable. "No," she said, "I didn't." "Why not?" "Because someone had to stand up to him, and I was tired of being afraid." The gallery erupted in whispers. The judge called for order. Catherine stepped down. Adrian testified the next day. He was calm, precise, devastating. He described the symptoms, the treatments, the slow realization that he was being poisoned. The jury hung on every word. When the defense tried to cross-examine him, tried to suggest he'd been mentally unstable, Adrian looked the lawyer dead in the eye and said, "I was being systematically poisoned for 2 years. If I seemed unstable, it's because someone was deliberately making me that way." The defense had no response. Whitmore took the stand in his own defense. Big mistake. He tried to claim ignorance, said the compound had been prescribed by another physician, that he'd merely been following orders, that he had no idea it was harmful. The prosecution tore him apart. They produced purchase orders in Whitmore's handwriting, receipts signed by him, notes detailing dosage increases. Every piece of evidence pointed to deliberate, calculated poisoning. By the end of his testimony, Whitmore was sweating, stumbling over his words, contradicting himself. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. The sentencing came a week later. Thomas, 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15. Whitmore, life in prison, no possibility of parole. Catherine sat beside Adrian in the gallery and felt something break inside her chest. Not grief, not relief. Justice. Imperfect, incomplete, but real. As the judge dismissed the court, Thomas turned in his seat and found Catherine in the crowd. Their eyes met across the room. She didn't look away. She'd spent months afraid of this man, afraid of what he could do to her, who he could turn her into. But looking at him now, shackled, convicted, powerless, she felt nothing. He was just a man. A small, cruel man who'd tried to destroy someone for money. And he'd failed. Thomas seemed to realize it too. His expression shifted, something like recognition crossing his face. Then the bailiffs led him away. Catherine didn't watch him go. The journey back to Blackthorn took 2 days. Catherine and Adrian traveled in comfortable silence, stopping at inns along the way. People recognized them. The case had been in every newspaper. But they were polite about it, curious, but respectful. At one inn, an older woman approached Catherine while she was waiting for their room. "You're her, aren't you?" the woman asked. "The one from the trial." Catherine tensed. "Yes?" "I just wanted to say," the woman's voice was soft, "my daughter was engaged to a man like that. Not a murderer, but cruel. Controlling. I told her to leave him, but she was afraid. Afraid of what people would say, what would happen to her." "Did she leave him?" "After she read about you in the papers." The woman smiled. "She said if you could stand up to a man with a gun, she could stand up to a man with words. She broke the engagement last week." Catherine's throat tightened. "I'm glad." "So am I." The woman patted her hand. "Thank you." She walked away before Catherine could respond. Adrian appeared at her elbow. "What was that about?" Catherine shook her head, unable to speak. He didn't push. They reached Blackthorn as the sun set on the second day. The estate looked different somehow, less forbidding. The gates were still rusty, the gardens still overgrown, but it felt less like a tomb. Adrian helped Catherine down from the carriage. "Home," he said quietly. Catherine looked up at the house. "Is it?" "It could be, if you want it to be." She thought about that, about what home meant. Safety, belonging. choice. Yes, she said. I think I do. They climbed the steps together. Inside, the house was cold and dark. They'd been gone for nearly a month, but it was theirs. Adrian lit a fire in the library while Catherine found food in the kitchen. They ate together at the long wooden table, not speaking, just existing in the same space. Finally, Adrian broke the silence. I've been thinking. About? The future. What comes next? He set down his fork. The estate needs work, real work, repairs, staff, proper management, and I can't do it alone. I already said I'd help. I know, but I'm not talking about help. I'm talking about partnership. Adrian met her eyes. I want to rebuild this place. Make it what it used to be, a working estate, a community, something worth preserving. But I need someone who understands what we're trying to do, someone who won't let me retreat into isolation again. Catherine's heart was pounding. What are you asking? I'm asking if you'll be my partner, not my employee, not my housekeeper, my equal in this. Adrian, I know it's unconventional. I know people will talk, but I don't care. His voice was steady. You saved my life, Catherine, more than once, and I trust you more than I've trusted anyone. So I'm asking, will you help me build something new here? Catherine stared at him. A week ago, she'd been property, an asset to be traded. Now she was being offered partnership, respect, choice. Yes, she said. Yes, I will. Adrian's smile was the first truly unguarded thing she'd seen from him. Good, he said. Then we start tomorrow. They started by hiring staff. Not many, just enough to keep the house running. A cook, 2 maids, a groundskeeper. People from Ashford, recommended by Martin, who'd helped spread word that Blackthorn was under new management. The new staff were cautious at first. The estate's reputation was hard to shake, but Catherine was patient, and Adrian was fair, and slowly the house came back to life. Next came repairs. The east wing, damaged by fire, was rebuilt. The roof was patched, windows replaced, gardens cleared and replanted. It took months, hard, exhausting months of work and setbacks, and moments where Catherine wondered if they'd bitten off more than they could chew. But slowly, steadily, Blackthorn transformed. The breakthrough came in spring. Catherine was in the garden, actually in it, on her hands and knees, helping the groundskeeper plant roses, when a carriage rolled up the drive. She stood, brushing dirt from her dress, and watched as a well-dressed couple stepped out. Can I help you? Catherine asked. The woman smiled. We're looking for the Duke of Blackthorn. We heard he's taking on tenants again. Catherine blinked. Tenants? For the farms on the eastern border. They've been abandoned for years, but we heard the new management is making improvements. The woman's expression was hopeful. We're looking to lease land. Start fresh. Catherine's mind raced. She and Adrian had discussed opening the tenant farms eventually, but they hadn't advertised yet. Word travels fast, she said carefully. Good news does. The man spoke for the first time. We heard what happened at the trial. How you and the Duke stood up to corruption. People respect that. Catherine felt something warm bloom in her chest. I'll fetch the Duke, please. Wait here. She found Adrian in the library going over accounts. We have visitors, she said. A couple looking to lease farmland. Adrian looked up, surprised. Already? Apparently our reputation precedes us. Our reputation. Adrian stood, a smile playing at his lips. I like the sound of that. They met with the couple in the drawing room. By the end of the conversation, they'd agreed to a lease. Fair terms, reasonable rent, mutual respect. As the couple left, Catherine watched from the window. This is real, she said quietly. We're actually doing this. Adrian joined her at the window. We are. People are going to keep coming, you know? Once word spreads that Blackthorn is stable again. I know. Are you ready for that? Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to look at her, his expression serious. 2 months ago, I thought I was dying alone in this house. Now I'm standing here with you, watching people arrive who want to be part of what we're building. So yes, I think I'm ready. Catherine smiled. Good, because I'm not doing this without you. Wouldn't dream of asking you to. They stood together at the window, watching the sun set over the newly cleared gardens. And Catherine felt something she hadn't felt in years. Catherine had almost forgotten what it felt like. That quiet certainty that tomorrow might actually be better than today. She'd spent so long bracing for disaster that standing here, watching the sun paint the gardens gold, feeling safe, felt almost wrong. Almost. Adrian moved away from the window first, breaking the spell. We should celebrate. Catherine turned. Celebrate what? Our first tenants. The fact that we're still alive. Take your pick. He was already heading toward the door. There's wine in the cellar. Good wine from my father's collection. We should drink it before it turns to vinegar. I don't think wine works that way. Then we should drink it anyway. Catherine followed him downstairs, through the kitchen, to a cellar door she'd never bothered opening. Adrian lit a lamp and led the way down stone steps into cool darkness. The cellar was surprisingly organized. Racks of bottles, neatly labeled, covered 3 walls. Adrian scanned them with the focus of a man on a mission. Here. He pulled out a bottle covered in dust. 1802. My father bought this the year I was born. Said he'd open it when I married. Catherine raised an eyebrow. That seems presumptuous. He was an optimistic man. Adrian wiped the dust away with his sleeve. I think he'd approve of this. Of drinking his wedding wine for a tenant lease? Of drinking it with you? The words hung between them, heavier than they should have been. Catherine's throat tightened. Adrian, I know. He cut her off gently. I'm not proposing or declaring anything. I just mean... He stopped, searching for words. You're the closest thing to family I have left, and I think my father would have liked that. Catherine nodded, not trusting her voice. They carried the bottle back to the library, and Adrian opened it with more force than necessary. The cork shot across the room. Subtle, Catherine said. I'm out of practice. He poured 2 glasses and handed one to Catherine. The wine was dark red, almost black, and smelled like earth and berries and something she couldn't name. To Blackthorn, Adrian said, raising his glass. To survival, Catherine countered. To both. They drank. The wine was extraordinary, rich and complex and absolutely wasted on Catherine's unsophisticated palate, but she appreciated it anyway. Your father had good taste, she said. He had expensive taste. Good was debatable. Adrian settled into his chair by the fire. He also had terrible judgment in people. Trusted everyone, including Whitmore. You're not responsible for his mistakes. I know, but I repeated them. That's worse. Catherine sat across from him. You trusted someone you'd known for years. Someone your father trusted. That's not a mistake, Adrian. That's just human. Human got me poisoned. Human also got you out of it. You questioned things eventually. You let me help. You fought back. Catherine leaned forward. You're allowed to have made mistakes and still deserve to survive them. Adrian stared at his wine. When did you get so wise? When I stopped being so scared. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking wine that was probably worth more than Catherine's entire wardrobe, watching the fire burn down to embers. I need to ask you something, Adrian said eventually. All right. That day, when Thomas had the gun, you stepped between us. His voice was careful. Why? Catherine didn't have to think about the answer. Because you deserve to live. That's not... Yes, it is. She met his eyes. Thomas was going to kill you, Adrian. For money, for greed, for nothing that mattered. And I couldn't let that happen, not without trying to stop it. You could have died. So could you. That seemed worse. Adrian's expression was unreadable. I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything with it. It's just true. Catherine set down her glass. I'm here because I chose to be. Everything that's happened since, all of it, has been my choice. And I'd make the same choices again. Even knowing how close we came to losing. Especially knowing that. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right. All right? I'm accepting your reckless heroism as a fact of life and moving on. Catherine laughed. It felt good. Probably wise. The wine bottle was empty by the time they went upstairs. Catherine was pleasantly dizzy, warm in a way that had nothing to do with the fire. She stopped at her door and turned to find Adrian watching her. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For staying, Catherine smiled. You say that like I did you a favor. I'm the one who got a home out of this. Still, thank you. He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into his own room. Catherine stood in the hallway for a moment, her hand on her door handle, something warm and complicated blooming in her chest. Then she went inside and slept better than she had in months. The next morning brought another visitor. Catherine was in the drawing room reviewing lease agreements when the new maid, Emma, young and nervous, appeared in the doorway. "Miss Whitlock? There's a woman here to see you." Catherine looked up. "Did she give a name?" "Mrs. Margaret Hartley. She says it's about employment." Catherine frowned. They weren't hiring. "Send her in, I suppose." The woman who entered was middle-aged, well-dressed but worn, with sharp eyes and careful posture. She held herself like someone who'd seen better days and was determined not to show it. "Mrs. Hartley," Catherine said, standing, "how can I help you?" "I'll be direct, Miss Whitlock. I'm looking for work." The woman's voice was cultured, educated. "I was a governess for the Pemberton family until last month. The position ended when the children went to school." "I'm sorry, but we don't have children here." "I know, but I heard you're rebuilding the estate, bringing in tenants, managing accounts." Mrs. Hartley's eyes were steady. "I have experience with administration, correspondence, household management. I can keep books, manage staff, handle difficult situations with discretion." Catherine studied her. "Why Blackthorn? Surely there are easier positions." "Easier, yes, but not better." Mrs. Hartley's expression was carefully neutral. "I read about the trial, Miss Whitlock. What you did. How you stood up to men with power and money and won. That matters to me." "Why?" "Because I spent 20 years working for families who treated their staff like furniture. Useful when needed, invisible otherwise. I'm tired of being invisible." The woman's voice didn't waver. "You're building something different here. I'd like to be part of it." Catherine felt something shift in her chest. "I need to discuss this with the Duke. Can you return tomorrow?" "Of course." Mrs. Hartley nodded once, precise. "Thank you for your time." After she left, Catherine went to find Adrian. He was outside with the groundskeeper, discussing something about drainage. "We need to talk," Catherine said. Adrian looked up, immediately concerned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, but I think we just found our estate manager." They hired Mrs. Hartley the next day. Within a week, it became clear that Catherine had undersold her. The woman was a miracle worker. She organized the household accounts, established schedules for the staff, set up a proper filing system for correspondence and contracts. More importantly, she treated Catherine and Adrian like employers, not charity cases or curiosities. She was professional, efficient, and completely uninterested in gossip. "Where did you find her?" Adrian asked one evening, watching Mrs. Hartley organize the library with military precision. "She found us," Catherine said. "Apparently we have a reputation." "For what?" "Being decent, I think." Adrian made a face. "That's a low bar. And yet most people can't clear it." With Mrs. Hartley managing the household, Catherine had time to focus on the estate itself. She rode out to the tenant farms with the groundskeeper, assessed what repairs were needed, made lists of supplies and costs. The first tenant family, the Mitchells, moved in during late spring. They were young, hopeful, and cautiously optimistic about the land. Catherine visited a week after they'd settled. Mrs. Mitchell answered the door, flour on her hands and a baby on her hip. "Miss Whitlock, please, come in." The cottage was small but clean, bright, the kind of place people built lives in. "I wanted to check if you needed anything," Catherine said. "Supplies, repairs, anything we might have missed." "The roof leaks a bit in the back room, but my husband says he can patch it." "We'll send someone. That's what we're here for." Mrs. Mitchell's eyes went suspiciously bright. "You mean that, don't you?" "Of course. You'd be surprised how many landlords don't." The woman shifted the baby to her other hip. "We worked a farm up north before this. The owner never fixed anything, charged us for repairs we had to do ourselves. When we complained, he threatened eviction." Catherine felt her jaw tighten. "That won't happen here." "I believe you," Mrs. Mitchell smiled. "That's why we came." Catherine returned to Blackthorn with a renewed sense of purpose. This was bigger than saving Adrian or escaping Thomas. This was about building something that actually mattered. That night, she and Adrian went over the accounts in the library. "We're spending more than we're making," Adrian said, frowning at the ledger. For now. But once the farms are productive, once we have steady tenants, that could take years. So we take years. Catherine met his eyes. Unless you're planning to give up? No, just stating facts. Then here's another fact. We have enough reserves to last 18 months if we're careful. That's enough time to make this work. Adrian leaned back in his chair. You've gotten very confident about this. Someone has to be. You're too busy being practical. Practical keeps us afloat. And confidence keeps us moving forward. We need both. Adrian's mouth twitched. When did you become the optimistic one? When I realized I had something worth being optimistic about. They worked until midnight, balancing numbers and making plans. It was tedious work, the kind Catherine would have found unbearable 6 months ago. Now it felt like building something real. Summer arrived with heat and growth and more visitors than Catherine expected. 2 more tenant families. A blacksmith looking to set up shop in the village. A widow asking about the cottage near the eastern gate. People who'd heard that Blackthorn was stable again, that the new management was fair. Catherine interviewed them all. Some she accepted. Others she politely declined when it became clear they were looking for charity, not partnership. You're getting ruthless, Adrian observed after she turned away a man who'd clearly expected a free ride. I'm being practical. That's what you wanted, wasn't it? I wanted you to be yourself. This is just a bonus. By midsummer, the estate was unrecognizable. The gardens were blooming. The tenant farms had crops in the ground. The village had life again. Smoke from chimneys, children playing in the square, the sound of the blacksmith's hammer ringing through the afternoons. Catherine stood at the edge of the garden one evening, watching the sun set, and felt that dangerous flutter of hope again. It's working, Adrian said, appearing beside her. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not surprised. He paused, searching for words. I'm grateful. This was your vision as much as mine. Maybe more. It was survival for both of us. It's more than that now. He was right. Somewhere along the way, this had stopped being about escaping their pasts and started being about building their futures. Catherine turned to look at him, really look at him. He was healthier than she'd ever seen him, color in his face, weight back on his frame, that constant exhaustion gone from his eyes. He looked alive. What? Adrian asked, noticing her staring. Nothing, just, you look good. His ears went red. I look adequate. Take the compliment, Adrian. I don't know how. Practice. He smiled, and Catherine's heart did something complicated in her chest. The moment broke when Mrs. Hartley appeared, calling them in for dinner. They ate together in the dining room, a relatively new development since they'd finally hired enough staff to make formal meals feasible. It felt strange at first, sitting at opposite ends of a long table, but they'd adapted. There's a letter for you, Mrs. Hartley said, handing Catherine an envelope after dessert. Came this afternoon. Catherine recognized the handwriting immediately. Her stomach dropped. Thomas. She'd known this was coming. He was allowed to send correspondence from prison. She'd just hoped he wouldn't. What is it? Adrian asked, noticing her expression. Letter from Thomas. Catherine broke the seal with steady hands. The letter was short. Catherine, I hope you're satisfied with yourself. You've destroyed my life, my reputation, everything I built. For what? A dying man and a crumbling estate? You'll regret this. Maybe not today. Maybe not this year. But eventually, you'll realize you threw away everything for nothing. I would have given you everything. A title, security, a future. Instead, you chose him. Your loss. T. Catherine read it twice. Then she folded it carefully and set it on the table. What does he say? Adrian asked. That I'll regret choosing you over him. Adrian's expression went carefully blank. Will you? Catherine met his eyes. No. You sound certain. I am certain. She picked up the letter again. Thomas offered me security, a comfortable cage, a life where I'd always be grateful to him for rescuing me from nothing. She stood, crossed to the fireplace. But you offered me partnership, respect, a chance to build something that actually matters. She threw the letter into the fire and watched it burn. That's my answer. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and joined her by the fire. I offered you those things because you deserved them, he said quietly. Not because I expected gratitude. I know. That's why it matters. They stood together, watching Thomas's words turn to ash. He's wrong, you know, Adrian said eventually. About what? You didn't throw anything away. You escaped something that would have destroyed you. He looked at her. And you saved my life in the process. That's not nothing, Catherine. That's everything. Catherine's throat tightened. Don't make me cry. Mrs. Hartley will think something's wrong. Something is wrong. You're standing too far away. Before Catherine could process that, Adrian closed the distance and pulled her into a hug. It was the first time he'd touched her like this, deliberately, carefully, like she mattered. Catherine's breath caught. Then she wrapped her arms around him and held on. Thank you, Adrian said against her hair. For what? For not giving up. On me. On this. On any of it. Thank you for being worth it. They stayed like that until Mrs. Hartley discreetly cleared her throat from the doorway. Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone at the door asking for Miss Whitlock. Catherine pulled back reluctantly. Who? She didn't give a name, but she looks... Mrs. Hartley hesitated. Desperate. Catherine exchanged a glance with Adrian, then followed Mrs. Hartley to the entrance hall. A young woman stood just inside the door, soaked from rain. Catherine hadn't realized had started. She was maybe 20, thin, with a bruise darkening her left cheekbone. I'm Catherine Whitlock, Catherine said gently. How can I help you? The woman's voice shook. I read about you, in the papers, what you did at the trial, how you stood up to your fiancé. Yes? The woman's composure cracked. I need to get away from mine, but I have nowhere to go. No money, no family. I thought maybe... Catherine understood immediately. What's your name? Sarah. Sarah Fletcher. Any relation to Martin Fletcher? My cousin, but he doesn't know I'm here. No one does. Sarah's hands twisted together. I'm supposed to marry William Brennan next month. Everyone says I'm lucky. His family has money, connections. But when we're alone, he's... You don't have to explain. Catherine stepped closer. You need somewhere safe, is that right? Sarah nodded, tears spilling over. Catherine looked at Mrs. Hartley, who gave a slight nod. We have room, Catherine said. You can stay here, as long as you need. Sarah's eyes went wide. I can't pay... I'm not asking you to. I'm offering you safety, and time to figure out what comes next. Catherine held out her hand. Is that something you want? Sarah took her hand like it was a lifeline. Yes, please. Over the next few weeks, 3 more women arrived. All of them had read about the trial. All of them were running from something, violent fiancés, controlling fathers, situations that would have trapped them. Catherine gave them all the same offer, safety, time, and a chance to choose their own futures. Some stayed only a few days before moving on to family or friends who could help. Others stayed longer, working in the house or gardens in exchange for room and board. Adrian watched it all happen with a mixture of concern and admiration. We're becoming a refuge, he said one evening. Is that a problem? Not a problem, just unexpected. He gestured around the drawing room where 2 of the women were sewing by the fire. I thought we were rebuilding an estate. We are. This is part of it. Catherine set down the letter she'd been reading, another request for help. These women have nowhere else to go, Adrian. We have space, resources, safety. Why wouldn't we offer it? Because it's dangerous. If any of their families come looking, then we deal with it. Together. Catherine met his eyes. I know what it's like to be trapped, to think there's no way out. If we can give people an exit, even temporarily, that matters. Adrian studied her face. You're building an army. I'm helping people who need it. Same thing, Catherine smiled. Maybe. The confrontation came in autumn. William Brennan arrived at Blackthorn with 3 men and a lawyer, demanding the return of his property. Catherine met them at the door with Mrs. Hartley and Adrian on either side. Sarah Fletcher is not your property, Catherine said calmly. She's a person who chose to leave you. She's my fiancé, legally contracted to marry me. Brennan's face was red with rage. You have no right to keep her here. We're not keeping her. She's staying of her own free will. That's kidnapping. That's refuge. Adrian stepped forward, and Catherine saw the flash of steel in his expression. Miss Fletcher is under the protection of this estate. If you attempt to remove her by force, I'll have you arrested for trespassing and assault. Brennan's lawyer stepped in. Your Grace, perhaps we could discuss this reasonably. There's nothing to discuss, Catherine interrupted. Sarah is an adult. She has the right to refuse marriage. And she has. She signed a contract. Under duress, which makes it invalid. Catherine pulled out a document, something Mrs. Hartley had helped her draft. Sarah has formally withdrawn her consent. The engagement is over. Brennan lunged forward. Adrian caught him by the arm, holding him back with surprising strength. Leave, Adrian said quietly. Now, before I lose my temper. The lawyer pulled Brennan back. We'll pursue this legally. Good luck, Catherine's voice was ice. I have excellent lawyers, and judges who remember what happened at my trial. They'll be very interested to hear about a man trying to force a woman into marriage against her will. Brennan spat on the ground at her feet. You'll regret this. Everyone keeps telling me that. I'm still waiting. They left, Brennan shouting threats the whole way down the drive. Catherine's hands were shaking by the time they were gone. That was reckless, Adrian said. That was necessary. He could come back, with more men, with violence. Then we'll be ready. Catherine straightened her shoulders. I'm not afraid of men like him anymore, Adrian. I've faced worse. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. You really are building an army. Is that a problem? No, I think it's brilliant. By winter, Blackthorn had transformed completely. The estate was thriving. Tenants were settled. Crops were harvested. The village had grown into a small community of people who'd come because they heard Blackthorn was different, fair, safe, real. Catherine stood in the library on the first day of December, looking at the ledgers, and realized they'd done it. They'd survived. More than that, they'd won. Adrian found her there, staring at numbers that finally made sense. We're solvent, Catherine said, almost disbelieving. We're what? Solvent, in the black, making money. She pointed at the ledger. The tenant farms produced enough to cover expenses and leave a surplus. We're actually profitable. Adrian crossed the room and looked at the numbers himself. Then he looked at Catherine. We did it. We did. He pulled her into his arms without warning, lifting her off the ground and spinning once. Catherine laughed, surprised and delighted. Adrian, we did it, he repeated, setting her down but not letting go. You did it. We did it together. Adrian's expression shifted into something serious. Catherine, I need to tell you something. Her heart jumped. All right. When you first arrived, I thought you were just another person Thomas sent to watch me die. Another pawn in his game. His hands were steady on her waist. But you weren't. You never were. You are the bravest person I've ever met. Catherine's throat tightened. Adrian, let me finish. He took a breath. I don't know what we are. Partners, friends, something else. But I know I don't want to do this without you. Any of this. The estate, the future, any of it. His eyes were steady on hers. So I'm asking, will you stay? Not as my employee, not as my estate manager, as whatever you want to be. Catherine's heart was pounding. What do you want me to be? Everything. The word hung between them, enormous and terrifying and perfect. Catherine reached up and touched his face. Yes. Yes? Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I want this. Yes to all of it. Adrian kissed her. It was gentle and careful and completely overwhelming. Catherine's hands fisted in his shirt, holding on, and he pulled her closer, like he was afraid she might disappear. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Well, Catherine managed, that's new. Adrian laughed, genuine and unguarded. Good new? Very good new. They stood there, foreheads pressed together, until Mrs. Hartley knocked on the door. Sorry to interrupt, she said, not sounding sorry at all. But there's someone here to see both of you. Catherine and Adrian reluctantly separated. Who? Adrian asked. Says his name is Lord Ashford. Claims he's here on behalf of the Crown. They exchanged concerned glances and followed Mrs. Hartley to the drawing room. Lord Ashford was exactly what Catherine expected. elderly, distinguished, with the kind of bearing that came from a lifetime of authority. He stood when they entered, bowing slightly. "Your Grace, Miss Whitlock, thank you for seeing me." "What can we do for you, Lord Ashford?" Adrian asked. "I'm here to deliver a royal commendation." The Lord pulled out an official-looking document. "The Crown has been following your case with interest. Your exposure of corruption, your work rebuilding this estate, your—" He glanced at Catherine. "Unconventional approach to justice. It's been noticed." Catherine's heart sank. This sounded like a reprimand, but Lord Ashford smiled. "In recognition of your service to the realm and your exemplary management of Blackthorn, the Crown is awarding you both medals of honor. Additionally, Miss Whitlock, you're being granted a royal pardon for any irregularities in your current position." Catherine blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your arrangement here, unmarried, unrelated, managing an estate together, is unconventional. There are laws against such things. The Crown is choosing to overlook them." The Lord's expression was kind. "You've done more good in 6 months than most nobles do in a lifetime. That deserves recognition, not punishment." Adrian found his voice first. "Thank you, my lord. We're honored." "The honor is ours." Lord Ashford handed over the document. "Congratulations, both of you." After he left, Catherine and Adrian stared at the royal seal on the document. "We're legitimate," Catherine said, almost laughing. "Officially, royally legitimate." "We always were. This just makes it harder for people to argue." Catherine looked at him. "Do you realize what this means? That we can keep doing what we're doing without legal challenges? That we won, Adrian, completely. Thomas is in prison, Whitmore is disgraced. We're not just surviving, we're thriving. And the Crown just acknowledged it." Adrian pulled her close again. "We won. We won." Spring arrived with new growth and new possibilities. Catherine stood in the garden, properly restored now, with roses and lavender and herbs growing in organized beds, and watched the estate come alive. The village had doubled in size, more tenants, more families, more people who'd heard that Blackthorn was a place where fairness mattered. Sarah Fletcher was still there, working as Mrs. Hartley's assistant. She'd refused 3 marriage proposals and was apparently planning to stay unmarried indefinitely. "I like my life the way it is," she told Catherine. "Why would I change it for a man?" 2 other women had stayed as well. They worked the gardens and helped with the household and seemed perfectly content with their independence. Adrian appeared beside Catherine, sliding an arm around her waist. They did that now, touched each other casually, openly, without hesitation. "Thinking?" he asked. "About how far we've come." "Long way from you throwing poison out a carriage window." Catherine laughed. "That feels like a lifetime ago." It was. "We're different people now." He was right. The woman who'd arrived at Blackthorn terrified and trapped was gone. In her place was someone stronger, braver, free. "Adrian? Will you marry me?" He went very still. "What?" Catherine turned to face him. "I'm asking you to marry me. For real this time. Not a contract, not an arrangement, just us choosing each other." Adrian's eyes were suspiciously bright. "You're serious?" "Completely. The Crown already pardoned our living arrangements. We don't need—" "I know we don't need to. I want to." Catherine took his hands. "I want to choose this. Choose you, publicly and permanently. So yes. Adrian Vale, will you marry me?" Adrian's smile was brilliant. "Yes." "Yes?" "Yes. Absolutely, obviously." He kissed her, right there in the garden, in full view of anyone who cared to look. Yes to all of it. They were married in the spring, in the village church that overlooked Blackthorn's grounds. It was small, intimate, just the people who mattered. Mrs. Hartley, the tenants, Sarah, and the other women, Martin Fletcher, a handful of friends from Ashford. No fancy dress, no elaborate ceremony, just Catherine in a simple white gown and Adrian in his best suit, promising to choose each other every day for the rest of their lives. When the vicar pronounced them married, the whole village cheered. The celebration lasted until dawn. Music and dancing and food and joy. People who'd come to Blackthorn looking for refuge found family instead. Catherine stood at the edge of it all, watching, and felt that dangerous hope bloom into something certain. This was real. This was theirs. And it would last. Adrian found her as the sun rose, pulling her away from the crowd. "Where are we going?" Catherine asked. "Somewhere quiet, just for a minute." He led her to the garden, to the spot where she'd proposed, and they stood together watching the sunrise paint the sky gold and pink. "I have something for you," Adrian said. He pulled out a small wooden box and handed it to her. Inside was a key. "What's this for?" Catherine asked. "The estate. All of it." Adrian's voice was quiet. "I've had the paperwork drawn up. Blackthorn is yours. Legally. Completely. If something happens to me, you inherit everything." Catherine's hands were shaking. "Adrian, you saved this place, Catherine. You saved me. And I want you to know it's yours. Not as my wife. As my partner." He took her hands. "Everything we've built. It's ours. Equally." Catherine couldn't speak. She just held the key and let the tears come. "I love you," she managed finally. "I love you too." They stood together as the sun rose over Blackthorn, over the gardens and fields and village they'd built from nothing. Two people who'd been discarded by the world, who'd been used and betrayed and nearly destroyed, and they'd survived. More than that, they'd won. Not by violence, not by revenge, by choosing each other, by building something better than what they'd left behind. Catherine pocketed the key and took Adrian's hand. "Ready to go back?" he asked. "Ready to start the rest of our lives?" Adrian smiled. "Always." They walked back toward the celebration together, toward the future they'd chosen, toward a life built on respect and partnership and love. Behind them, Blackthorn Estate stood strong against the dawn sky. No longer a tomb, no longer a prison. Home.